Reading a magazine on a tablet is nowadays one of the most common ways to do so, and topping this trend is one of the most prestigious companies, Forbes magazine. Welcome to the Social Network Show. Hello there. On today's special series of one-on-one interviews straight from the New Media Expo, Dr. Nat sits down with Bruce Upbin. Mr. Upbin is the managing editor of the prestigious Forbes magazine. He oversees the wealth and data platforms, including the Forbes 400, the world's billionaires, and the global 2,000 leading companies. Among other things, Dr. Natalie discusses the topic of consumers who want to preserve their pseudonymity to get better offers by giving up some of their privacy. Take it away, Dr. Nat.
And so I'm here with Bruce Upbin, and I wanted to talk to him about this article that he just wrote about pseudonymity and anonymity. And so when I read it, it really struck me, looking at consumers who are trying to preserve their privacy and maybe give up some so they can get better deals, and social technology companies who are really relying on the data. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about your point of view on that.
Okay. So, in the social media world, there's a spectrum from totally anonymous, which has its benefits and virtues in enabling free expression without fear of retribution, all the way to the real name movement, if you will, which Facebook has certainly championed. And I think using real names and what people who are so passionate about it believe that it's the path to a global community where people can make true, authentic connections and can speak with, be polite, and be authentic, which is a key attribute in social. But if you look at the networks that are truly insistent on using your real name and actively police fake identities and accounts, it's because they have a focus on the bottom line and want to sell those names and the behaviors attributed to those names to advertisers like Facebook.
So to me, what's really interesting is, so I've come from the old CRM world, right? I was an analyst and a management consultant, and so our dream was one-to-one personalized marketing, right? To be able to tailor the message based on the behavior of that particular consumer and deliver these one-to-one messages. And so what I wonder is, we have Zynga, we have Facebook. Do you think that these two leaders really understood what they were doing when they were building these social networks with respect to one-to-one personalization and CRM, or were they just kind of doing this by the seat of their pants?
Well, I don't know if there's a CRM component to it, if that's what you mean in the classic sense. I do think that Facebook knew that they wanted real people's lives online. With Zynga was so attached to Facebook from the very beginning that you typically brought your Facebook identity to Zynga, and you operated as in Farmville or Cityville as your Facebook identity. Other networks like Foursquare, for example, or Instagram, were more relaxed about that because they didn't really focus on personalizing the ad stream to your interests. They were more interested in selling your activity to external parties. So the ads would not be within Foursquare. There'd be offers, but it didn't matter if you were Tony T, Bruce U, it didn't matter that had a last name. They just knew that I checked into all these different pizza places, so I'm a party of interest to pizza. But what Foursquare found was that there's now too many Tony T's and Tony S's, so it's not valuable. The names are not as valuable to advertisers and sponsors, to the venues that want to see who their best customers are. Who's Tony S? I don't know who that is. So if they become they're moving to a full name, it's all opt-in. That's the good thing about Foursquare. They're allowing you to choose rather than forcing it on people. So that becomes a much more valuable entity to sell to a venue.
What do you think the?
To answer your question about whether it was seat of the pants, I think a lot of these companies didn't have a revenue idea before they started. They just knew vaguely advertising, but not how.
And so what's interesting to me is there's a lot of belief that investors put in these kids and about what they did, and hats off to them for what they created in a very short period of time. But I just wonder if there's kind of a juxtaposition and a conflict of interest for consumers and social technology companies that are really trying to figure out the revenue model.
I think for most of the people of under 30 or under 25, they don't really care. 89% don't care. I'm just making that up, but a vast majority don't care that their names are being sold or their activities being sold. They think they just get enough out of it, and it's free and it's fun and it's easy. But you also see people moving to new platforms like Snapchat, or Instagram before it got bought by Facebook, where there is no inkling anywhere of an advertising play, and that maybe there's a subconscious feeling of comfort there for young people because they know they're not going to see Tide or Skechers or Ford Motor Company in their stream. Once they start seeing it, they back off. But I don't think it's because their names are showing up. I just think they don't like ads. I think people of a certain age, younger, are used to getting things for free and used to not buying things. Basically, they rent things and they steal things.
Right. I taught a couple of courses, and we did some market research. One of the students' thesis was about music and ripping it off, basically, and that she interviewed a bunch of students her own age, and they basically didn't think it was illegal, which was really an interesting point of view for millennials and Gen X and Gen Y versus the baby boomers, which we would never think of doing that. It was quite different.
Right. I mean, but then you have to think about personal expression, which is very important to everybody, no matter what your age is. And for a lot of people, it depends on the media being expressed. But on Spotify, it's a real name network, and people I think are interested in sharing their playlists with their friends and seeing what their real friends, are listening to. Whereas on a Reddit, for example, which is bigger than Spotify as a network, it's much more anonymous, and there's a lot more bad behavior, but a lot more fun. I think there's a lot more. That's a tremendously valuable network without anyone ever knowing anyone else's name, and it becomes a big problem when someone gets outed. The whole community rallies around protecting the anonymity of either the admins or the dwellers in whatever subreddit you're talking about.
Yeah, the behavior in communities is really fascinating to me. So if you were a startup and we look back at what the two Marks have done, what do you think they did well, and what do you think they could improve upon in terms of, because it kind of reminds me of the .com era, where a lot of people were convinced that there was real business to be had. And 10, 15 years later, we see that there is a very big component of online businesses. But at the time, a lot of the investors didn't get their return on their investment. So I'm just wondering, in the investment community, there's a lot of bets going on. Who's going to be able to monetize this stuff? Looking back at the mistakes or the good things that these two guys have done, what do you think companies should look for?
If you're starting a new social network now, I think if you want to, I don't think you can't make any money replicating what they did. I mean, Zynga is, for all of its investor distaste, is a big business still. It's still a couple $100 million a quarter in revenue. It stopped growing. That's the problem. It was a fad, but it was a well-executed fad. I don't think if they had, let's say they'd spammed all the things people hate Zynga for, if they had not spammed their users as much, if their games were a little more original, if they weren't so reliant on Facebook, those are things that entrepreneurs right now and venture capitalists are looking at. Those are the key mistakes Zynga made. The big one now for a lot of new startups is don't be too dependent on one platform, which is not a flaw for Facebook, that they are the platform. But that was one of their hallmarks, is that they focused just on the platform. And they could do an even better job making it easier for app developers to write to Facebook. They haven't even had a developer conference. Remember the F8?
Oh, yeah.
It's been 2 years since they've had one, and I was asking them why, and they said, well, we don't really want to do things just because it's an anniversary of a certain last year. They do it when they have something to tell people, and they're always working with developers on the side. So every company I talk to now, every startup that has a social app or something, they go onto Facebook. They make Facebook a big bet, but they do whatever they can to avoid putting all their chips in that metaphor, the circle, the number, and there's other ones that you can play, but not that many. So what they're forced to do is try to create their own, using Facebook identity, as the one, and then using social, signaling socially to the Facebook platform, like a Fab or a Wrap or Wantful, or a lot of the companies we've been writing about get all their inbound referrals by allowing their users to signal socially wherever it is.
I was just talking to a company called FanAppz, FANAPPZ, and what I found interesting about them is they're very interested in helping marketers gain more viewers and increase the engagement. But their play doesn't stop there. Their play is really about gathering that customer data and then helping that marketer become a lot smarter. Right. So it's a whole kind of database marketing play. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's a key idea for e-commerce companies. That's what they're not quite that, but if you look at a Birchbox or there's a company called Scavenger without the vowels.
I know, isn't it funny how all these names have no vowels?
Yeah. Flickr started that. Just drop the E. These companies are not really e-commerce. They're not consumer companies. They do have a consumer value. They give you samples, but all they are really is it's B2B2C, where they're in the middle, delivering something to consumers, but in order to get information back to the brands. It's an old business, like sampling does that, and a lot of sampling companies out there. It's interesting. Even Uber, the car.
I love Uber. When I'm in a city and I can't find a taxi, they rock.
I mean, Uber sees their customers as the drivers as much as it is the passengers. It's a great experience for passengers, but they want drivers to learn more and know more and give more information to the drivers using their platform. And same with Birchbox, where they change the offering all the time, and in that way they get around the bad economics of e-commerce, because e-commerce is a pretty tough business. There haven't been that many great exits in the public markets, and Amazon pretty much owns a lot of the value in that business.
Yeah, Amazon. Well, what's interesting about Amazon and the whole idea around brand advocates and advocacy was a lot of people don't know this, is when they were first starting out, and you probably know this, what they did was they went back and asked certain customers who kept giving them feedback, which was always interesting. I used to work in call centers a lot, and so the customers would be giving feedback to the company, but they weren't interested in, they just saw those people as complaining versus that could be gold. And one of the smart things that Amazon did was they took those people and they created affinity groups and really exploited the ability to take that feedback and integrate it. So when I talk to CEOs and they say, Dr. Nat, this social media stuff, don't tell anybody, I really don't get it. And I say, well, do you want to increase revenue? Do you want to decrease costs? And they're like, yeah, okay, tell me more. So I kind of think that it's what we've all wanted corporate life to look like, to be authentic and direct, and to have the voice of the consumer or customer reflected. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the best companies do listen more than they speak and observe more than they listen. You don't want to. The best companies do, like Intuit, for example, which I wrote about back in April. They move by moving all, especially nowadays when you can, in the software industry, when you can be a cloud company now, all of your customer interaction is now instrumented. Every ounce, every pixel of your website, and every email that can be analyzed for what people click on, what they don't click on, how long they stay once they click on certain areas. We do it on our news site all the time. So you can be making changes all the time and testing things all the time without really without actually having a focus group or doing the traditional means of customer listening and experience. It's 24 hours a day. Social is a little bit harder because you have to understand where people are coming from a little more. It's not really behavior. You need to then. Plenty of companies do this, where they have someone watching all the feeds, and then you begin to engage with some people and actually get them to tell the story of what actually happened here. Can we figure this out together? Best companies do that really well. I mean, Dana White, who we're going to hear from tomorrow, he's seen tweets from fans that have had a bad seat at a fight, a mixed martial arts fight. They were sitting behind the video booth, and they sent a picture. They tweeted a picture of, look at my crappy seats. Right. And so he had them moved right within 10 minutes.
See, and what great PR is that?
Yeah. So we're going to use it tomorrow on stage as more PR. But that's real response time. You don't see many CEOs even on Twitter.
Well, what's interesting is in the call center, we always used to try to get the CEOs to come to the call center and listen to calls, and they wouldn't. So then we would tape the calls and play it in the boardroom, and they would be like, oh my God, this is terrible. We have to make this stop happening. And then we'd say, well, in order to do that, here's the 100 things we'd have to change. Oh, well, we can't really do that. So you start to look at customer lifetime value. You start to look at, the cost of acquiring customers. It just seems to me that makes business sense to really listen to the voice of the customer. And there's a lot of good data in social.
And also, you can get a lot more data from these freemium models where people, use it. You get a lot more people in the door, and then you get more people reaching the limit, whether it's a storage, the number of, bytes or megabits they can use. You can quickly, you don't have to, it's, especially web businesses, it's much cheaper to service people and make changes, and you'd be remiss in not doing so.
So can you share with us what you guys are doing at Forbes?
And where do you start?
Well,
so many things.
Okay, so give us some insight.
Well, we just launched our new mobile magazine, which we're pretty proud of. It's a kind of a blend of print, tablet, and social all at once. It takes we haven't had a magazine app. We didn't believe in just putting our magazine on a tablet, and we didn't have the resources of a Condé Nast, say, to spend a year building this a workflow and a tool. So we found a great startup, these guys out of Adobe, who can take PDFs of a magazine, of our issue, each issue, and render it on a tablet beautifully, and then you could tap certain a photo or a diagram or a pull quote, and get more from our web, and we can integrate, because our magazine comes out every 2 weeks or so, but we run 300, 400 stories a day online, much bigger than the magazine. So we wanted to give people a sense of what's going on behind each issue, and so that flows at the top. It's a lot of fun. There's so much going on. Our focus right now is quality. We have scale. We built the site from 17 million uniques to 38, 39 now, just in 2 years. Yeah, we've had tremendous growth. We've been grateful for that, both in print and web. But growing that fast meant that we brought a lot of contributors on that we have to kind of take a look at and maybe start to call a little bit and give them better training, more training. So we've become a training organization. My job is much more training now than it is actually editing and writing.
And what do you think makes a really good columnist?
To spell, good grammar,
Detailed, yeah.
Original ideas.
Yeah.
Get rid of the rhetorical questions. Don't just look at your navel. A lot of people just start typing, and the blog posts just kind of spool off into meaningless, prognostication. I think you need to pick up the phone and call before you post. Unless you're writing about something you know about that happened to you personally. Some of our best posts have been business stories that were born out of personal experience. Like, I walked into a Best Buy and here's what I saw. But I'm trying to tell people, don't feel the need to write something every day if you don't have something to say.
And so, what would you like to leave us in terms of wisdom? Like, you're here at the show, we're seeing a lot of new technology, we're going to get to hear you speak and a lot of other thought leaders. What do you think is the most important thing that people should pay attention to?
Wow, I would think the quality of their thoughts. I tell people to read out loud what they write.
That's a great idea.
Even backwards, because nothing will destroy your credibility more than a lazy sentence, missing words, bad spelling. That's just the copy editor in me. But I would encourage people to think a lot more before they write, and write a lot more before they publish, and publish a lot more before they start talking to the world about it.
Amazing wisdom. Thank you, Bruce, very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Wise indeed, Dr. Natalie. This is it for now, but next week's show, Dr. Natalie discusses inventing the future. Is this really possible? We'll tell you all about a new interactive show that is the lifeline between scientists and people just like us. We'll explain in next week's show. See you then.